Good morning, Celtics fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Celtics Chronicle. I'm your boy, Adam Taylor. As usual, I'm joined by my homie, compadre, co-host in crime, Mr. Tim Sheils. What's popping, Tim?
Nothing much, just reeling from the news, so to speak.
What a day. The East has undergone a bit more of a power shift. It felt like the balance of power was already transferring to Philly following the Jaylen Brown trade. Now, if the scales weren't tipped before, they've certainly been tipped now with LeBron signing over there. I think today is a really good time to try and take stock of the East, and there's more moves to be happening, right? You got DeMar DeRozan as a free agent, Bradley Beal's a free agent, Russell Westbrook's a free agent. A lot of these big name aging stars are not a lot, but a handful of them sitting around on the free agency market right now, and they could definitely shore up a few of the teams that missed out on this LeBron sweepstakes. Miami being number one, Cleveland being another. But for the most part, that balance of power is going to be firmly set heading into the new season. And it's not looking 100% great for the Celtics right now. And I think that's where we need to start, right? We need to start with the Jaylen Brown deal. It's unfair to grade Boston on what's happening in Philly now over a deal they made at the start of the month before LeBron even came into the equation for Philly, and the revisionist history that's going to follow if, and that's a big if because I'm not sure I'm 100% sold on this, but if the Sixers do find a way to win a championship, that doesn't necessarily mean, one, that the Celtics made a mistake in trading Brown, or two, that Brown was the piece that Boston needed to keep in order to win their next chip. Neither of those two things are mutually exclusive with the fact that Boston decided to trade Brown.
Yeah, and I think that was an inevitability. Again, I'll beat that drum till the cows come home. I just think because of the way the CBA is and with these contracts, they were kind of forced. Even if you thought that Jaylen was living up to his contract, which generally speaking, when it comes to the analytics, they don't really support that. They were just had their hands tied. Financially, there was only so many things they could do, and they felt that the best move was moving on while they had, and they took the best offer that they could. Now, some people say the whole reason why the Celtics moved on from Jaylen, whether it's, fit, whether it's usage rate, it doesn't matter at the end of the day now because like what's done is done.
Yeah.
I don't think you should go ahead and revisit things because LeBron James ended up in Philly. Part of the reason why that Philly was even considered was because they got Jaylen Brown. That being said, I actually think that Paul George right now would be a better fit alongside LeBron in Philly than Jaylen Brown, mainly because of the usage rate. And that's really the biggest thing that I look at that situation with that roster. There's one basketball. And this isn't, a lot of people said the same thing about the, Kevin Durant Golden State Warriors when that deal first went down. How are they going to make it work? How are they going to make these guys fit? All that stuff. I think that's even worse with Philly because you're adding a guy like LeBron who's at the age he's at. It's a 2-year deal. I don't know the specifics if it's a second year player option. I always assume that it is.
Yeah, I'm assuming so.
Because he very well might hang it up. And I think there was talk of him potentially doing it after this past season. But because of the situation in Philly where, again, yeah, they right now on paper, they're one of the favorites, if not the favorite in the East. And it makes sense. Like I understand why, just based off pure talent. But
I mean, it's an all-star team. Top 7 rotation is ridiculous. You've got Maxey, Edgecombe, Brown, LeBron, Embiid, Dean Wade, and Anthony Simons. That's their top 7. And we were sitting here 2 years ago talking about how the Celtics had this interchangeable top 7 where any of them could potentially be an all-star at any given point. And we were really beating the drum of you have to capitalize on this when you can. And the Celtics did their roster acquisition by making smart moves. Now, to be fair, we have to give, and I hate doing this, you have to give credit to Philly. They've done exactly what Boston did. They made moves to pull the trigger on guys to then bring in people that they believe that they can take them to the next level to get a chip. Obviously, LeBron joining on a minimum is the icing on the cake for them. They could still go and make other moves. They could still potentially, I mean, right now, Draymond Green has not signed a contract with Golden State. They could potentially pick up Draymond Green on a minimum if Green doesn't want to be in Golden State. There's some other things that they can do, but I will say that I do agree that they are the favorite or joint favorite with the Knicks. I think what the Sixers have, what the Sixers have over New York in terms of talent, New York have over Philly in terms of continuity. And then just as you touch on that LeBron bit, potentially hanging it up, I know that Sham said on the Pat McAfee show earlier today, and we're recording this on Friday to publish on Saturday. I know that Sham said that there's belief or there's a good chance that LeBron sees out both years of this deal, which would take him to the end of his age 43 season. For me, I think when they win a chip, if they win a chip, LeBron calls it. If they win a championship this year, I do not see the value in LeBron coming back next year. If they don't, then I think he runs it back. And I think that the other part of this, like you mentioned, with Jaylen Brown being there and potentially being part of the catalyst to LeBron's decision, I don't know who put this out on Twitter, but otherwise I'd credit them. But they made a really good point. If Bron made this choice for basketball first and foremost, and legacy second, with money being a far distant third, then going to a team that hasn't won a chip in a really long time, where you can be part of that turnaround, is a great way to end your career. Now, we're talking about a guy that's won a championship with every team he's played for. Granted, he had to go back to Cleveland the second time to do it, but the fact remains, every team's jersey he's wore, he's lifted a championship with. And you go to Philly and do the same and then bow out. Now you're revered in Philly because you made the choice to go there. I think Brown being there played a role, but I don't think it was a catalyst to the level that some people are expecting it to be, because Philly already looked like they were just one or two pieces away, plus health, right?
Yeah, and I don't think it's necessarily like he was like the missing link or anything like that. I think it's just a matter of if you can add a player of his caliber on that type of deal, then you do it. And it's not to say that Philly needed to add him. I think that the opportunity presented itself. And again, adding a guy that has that resume, that has that championship pedigree, has the experience, and has worked with a lot of different players, he could bring that mentality and that kind of atmosphere. With it comes the entire circus that is LeBron James, but that is the dice roll that you take with that talent. I think I would talk the same way if he ended up in Boston, or if he ended up in Miami. But I think there's a reason why he didn't end up in Boston. There's a reason why he didn't go to Miami. He went to Philly because they just went ahead and pulled off that Jaylen Brown deal. And they still have a couple young guys between. He really, really is a big fan of Maxey, because if you go and revisit that board, Maxey's got a nice big star next to his name. Like, that's a reason why. And that's a very fair thing. I love Maxey. Tyrese Maxey's a very good player. I just am struggling to imagine what this lineup is going to look like, what the usage rate's going to be. And part of me still, I've voiced it on Twitter. I said it to you before we even recorded. I'm still not convinced that Joel Embiid's going to be in Philly. Part of me thinks that, because there was talks about this, right? Specifically with LeBron and where he was going to go, that he was trying to either get Kyrie Irving or Anthony Davis traded to whatever team that he was going to join. And the fact that we haven't heard anything really at all from Embiid on Jaylen Brown, we haven't heard anything from him so far, unless something popped up on Instagram. I checked his Twitter before we hopped on. Nothing on getting LeBron James. No reaction at all between Jaylen Brown and LeBron James joining your roster. This is a guy who's never made a conference final. Like, this is important. Adding guys of this caliber is important. So the fact that there's been no reaction from him at all on that stuff is really, really weird, in my opinion.
Yeah, and he could just be dealing with all this behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
But I think that when you're the franchise guy, and we can argue whether he still is with the rise of Maxey, the addition of Edgecombe, Jaylen Brown, LeBron, we can argue whether he is actually the franchise guy anymore. But when you have been the face of that franchise for as long as you have been, and then you make the moves that you've made over the last month, where you bring in an NBA champion, NBA Finals MVP, you bring in a LeBron James that even at 41 is arguably still top 15, top 20, top 25 in the league, and shows no sign of slipping any further below 25. When you make those moves and you bring in Anthony Simons, you bring in Dean Wade, you do all of these incremental different decisions that bring you to a point where you are now joint favorites in the East. You would expect to kind of want to experience that with the fans in some way. And granted, you're going to experience that with them throughout the season, but the NBA is a very social media driven product. And we've heard Adam Silver pissed off a bunch of NBA fans, I think it was last year or the year before, where he was like, oh, well, if you can't afford to watch the games, now it's split across all these. It's a highlight driven league.
insane.
That was bullshit. But at the same time, getting your social media manager, because most of these guys aren't managing their own accounts. I think Jaylen Brown's probably an exception there. But most of your guys, like hitting up your social media team, like do a post and welcome Jaylen Brown. Do a post and welcome LeBron James. It takes 2 seconds to send a text message or to do it yourself. I do find that quite weird. I don't read into the social stuff as much. I wasn't a big fan when everybody was like, oh, well, Tatum hasn't put up a post about Jaylen Brown. Like, yeah, he's got a phone, dude. He's going to text a guy and then maybe do something publicly. And I'd assume that's kind of where Joel Embiid's at. He's done a lot of stuff behind the scenes. I wouldn't imagine they haven't spoken. But yeah, I can see what you're saying. AD for Joel is kind of a weird one because I think that in a vacuum, Joel's still the better guy, and neither of them are healthy. But
No.
AD's marginally more healthy than Embiid. And he's got a championship to his name.
I think the contract is the big thing there too, because if you're looking at Philly from the perspective of you're lined up for this 2-year window with LeBron's contract, I think that if you're trying to avoid repeater tax in a couple years down the line, because this is the new landscape that you have to navigate with this CBA, it potentially opens you up to making some more moves down the line where if you get off of, I think Davis's contract has 2 more years on it. So he would hit free agency at the same time that LeBron would. That gives you a little bit more flexibility. So you're moving off of Joel Embiid's money long term, and you're making obviously LeBron happy in the process while still adding a high level big man. That's just my mindset with that, but who knows? I mean, at the end of the day, we have to worry about what the Celtics are going to do in response or how the rest of the East is going to do in response. One more thing before we pivot to that, I did want to mention this because Sam Quinn put this out earlier, and this is obviously going to be the biggest talking point within Philly, was usage rate and how these guys are going to mesh together on the floor. 37 players in the NBA last season touched the ball at least 68.4 times per game. 5 of them now play for the 76ers, which is Tyrese Maxey, VJ Edgecombe, LeBron James, Joel Embiid, and Jaylen Brown. Again, I know only one basketball on the floor at any given time, but that's still something that they're going to have to navigate. And I already thought that was going to be an issue before, just based on the fact of what Jaylen Brown's usage rate was last year, what Joel Embiid's usage rate is. And you also don't want to go ahead and stunt the growth of a guy like VJ Edgecombe, who actually out of all of this right now, like I feel really bad that he wasn't thrown in for 2 reasons into the Paul George, Jaylen Brown trade. Because 1, I would have loved him in Boston. And 2, I really, really think that this, unless they really navigate it differently and some guys are willing to sacrifice, it's going to really impede his development, I think. But who knows? It's, again, this is championships aren't won on paper, and this is just reactionary to what the news is. But I'm very interested to see what comes from this for the 76ers. I'm also interested to see how the Celtics react and what other deals start to fall in place because this deal is finally done.
Yeah, I don't expect the Celtics to do much, to be honest with you. I think that Brad Stevens is a guy that follows his plan regardless of what's happening around him. This season wasn't meant to be a championship year. We said this when Tatum got hurt, that it was going to be a 2-year window. And I remember having that conversation in depth and at length on multiple occasions that the first year was definitely going to suck, and then it didn't, obviously. And then I remember saying that because of the repeat attacks, the second year is also going to be part of this retooling process. The Celtics are not a finished product right now. They're probably going to be better than what we're expecting. I think Paul George is going to fit better than what a lot of people are expecting. Is he going to be Jaylen Brown? No, but you don't need him to be. You need him to be Paul George. I think that there's still moves to be made next summer once you're out of the repeater and now you can spend money without that additional impact of that tax coming onto you. Obviously, they're hard capped this year as well, which changes the math somewhere. They've got tradable assets. We spoke yesterday about how Jordan Walsh's contract is super valuable for multiple reasons. One of them because it's tradable. I do think that the Celtics will probably make a move in terms of just rounding out that roster if they feel like they want to keep 15 guys and trade Hauser down the line to get back under the tax. Bradley Beal's an option there. You could argue that DeMar DeRozan is somebody that could give you fill that mid-range scoring role that you lost with Brown, but I feel like that mid-range scoring role was part of the reason they were so comfortable moving on from Brown because of the system they run. I don't expect Brad to panic at all. Does he get more aggressive? Maybe, but if they're building for a window that starts next year, there's no guarantee LeBron's still there, for one. There's no guarantee that the Sixers stay healthy. There's no guarantee it works out there. I think Brad's taking a much bigger, or I'd expect him to be taking a much bigger picture of this in terms of, well, the Knicks are probably on a finite window right now because James Dolan is unequivocally ruled out going into that second apron. They've got questions over a Karl Anthony Towns extension that's going to come forward. They've got to figure out what to do with Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby. That team will eventually price itself out of remaining intact. If Dolan's clear cut, we're not doing the second apron, that team will eventually price itself out or age itself out. Philly, again, you've got Embiid that doesn't seem like he's got much longer left in the league just because he's never healthy. You've got LeBron that's 1 year, 2 year away. Those are the two big dogs right now, and the Celtics will be ready to step into that void, or I'm expecting that's what Boston does, and gives Tatum a year to really get his body back to 100% playing a full season. So I'm not expecting anything crazy. I do think next summer Brad Stevens pushes his chips in a little bit, but I think he does so in a way that doesn't risk the future of the team.
Yeah, and again, with the CBA being what it is, the contracts that you have, the valuable pieces, the young guys, those are going to just be valuable. Again, in terms of like potential trade chips, okay, but also just cost-controlled assets. And I think that's why it's the same reason why Philly didn't trade VJ Edgecombe, because he's a young up-and-coming player. He's cost-controlled. You've got him on his rookie scale deal still, I believe I'm correct on that front.
Yeah.
So, like those are guys that you want to keep around, not only just because of the promise that they show, but because if you're trying to build a championship roster, you're throwing the money at the big dogs, like a Jaylen Brown, like a Joel Embiid, like a Tyrese Maxey who's on his deal.
I mean, shit, just to jump in, Philly have got to figure out whether they want to give Jaylen an extension next summer, because that's when he becomes eligible again.
And that's also why I look at that situation with Joel Embiid and potentially moving on from him for a guy who is at least in the same tier, or at least offers you something similar in Anthony Davis, because eventually when he comes off of the books, then you're going to be able to have a little bit of more financial flexibility to build out that roster. So if they are trying to hold on to Jaylen Brown long term, that is something that they can do. I'm interested to see what other shoes fall. You mentioned Bradley Beal, rumored by Jake Fisher that he's interested between Boston and Miami. I do wonder if Miami either is going to go up or down in terms of chance, just because there isn't a LeBron there. So that was probably
Beal actually fits better with Miami with no LeBron there.
Mm-hmm. But I also know Westbrook too, as well.
Yeah. So I read something today from Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald where he spoke with a scout, and the scout was basically just like, the Heat aren't going to go after Westbrook because he's a terrible fit for what they need. He's a downhill guard, and you've already got that in Giannis. It's just not going to be a good fit. I think that if I'm Miami, I'll go after Brad Beal, because Brad Beal can score off the catch. He can give you some secondary. Everything you need from a secondary star, Brad Beal can give you. If you don't want Brad Beal, you go DeMar DeRozan, but you accept that you don't have the floor spacing that Bradley Beal would give you if you require DeMar DeRozan, because he's going to be in the mid-range, which means you're going to need to set him up on the perimeter, hope defenses close out on him so he can beat him off the closeout, or you're going to have to run actions to get him shuffle cutting into the post, into the mid-post. I'd much rather Brad Beal there. I do think as well, though, if I'm Miami, I'm not stopping at Brad Beal. I'm finding a way to bring in a Doug McDermott. Or a Seth Curry. You need more shooting around Giannis. And for me, that's kind of why Brad Beal makes the most sense going to Miami. Now, I'm not saying I don't want Brad Beal in Boston. I think there's a world where that could work. But I do think that in terms of basketball fit, there's not a team out there that needs Bradley Beal as much as what Miami does, that embraces giving aging stars the playing time and the roles that can sometimes help them have like a resurgence. We saw it. They've done it so many times at this point. They were playing Kyle Lowry when he was coming into the arena on a Zimmer frame. You know what I'm saying?
I also think too, one thing with that as well, I know that Miami's been tied to DeMar DeRozan, and that's always like, whenever he's out there, it always seems like a good addition. And I don't disagree. I think that for Miami, adding another guy like that on cheap money makes sense, especially when you are so financially pressed and you don't have a lot of young guys, or you've given up a bunch of young guys in this deal to get Giannis. It makes sense to bring in seasoned vets who are proven and also will have no problem gelling with what you have there. I still think a big part of me still believes that Bradley Beal does end up in Boston. I am curious as to see if and when that would happen. But to bring up that damn whiteboard that Rich Paul had out, Brad and Tatum on there. And I don't think it was Brad Stevens. I've had a pretty big feeling that it was Bradley Beal. The fact that the only two teams that I have seen publicly tied are Miami and Boston.
The Clippers have been mentioned as a return as well.
I don't know if he goes back to the Clippers just because of how things went. And again, it was an injury. Like, it was an unfortunate injury that happened really early in the season, especially anything involving like hips, just bad luck,
Yeah, you're right.
having a bad break, it's just a wash. But I also think that the Clippers are in a spot where they're really not going to be good next year. They might have some bright spots on that roster, but overall, there's a reason why the Celtics really valued that Clippers pick that they got in the deal involving Paul George. Those picks are going to be big for the Celtics, and the reason why is because the Clippers are going to be probably bad in a couple of years, if not bad next year.
I mean, it depends what happens with the Kawhi thing, and this is kind of where the East is at the moment. If Kawhi ends up in Toronto are a much bigger threat than what they are now. I think that people are sleeping on Indiana a little bit because Indiana get Tyrese Halliburton back this year. I don't think they're going to be a finals team or a conference finals team. There's going to be some adjustment there, but they've got Zubac, and I think a Zubac and Halliburton two-man game could be really interesting. There's not many better playmaking creators than Halliburton. He's going to be a huge boost. They're going to get healthy. Detroit, I'm very curious to see what they do moving forward, how they build on last season.
They still have to figure out everything with Durant, too.
Yeah, that's a big question mark. I've got to feel like Durant doesn't really have an option other than to come back now, but there's a good chance he could pick up his qualifying offer, at which point they're in a really weird position and they've got a decision to make coming towards the trade deadline. Cleveland, again, they've got some choices to make, but the point I'm making here right now is the East is getting healthier, it's getting deeper, and it's getting incredibly talented. And I think that when you look around, Charlotte are a team that could surprise people. There's a bunch of dudes there that are going to take a leap. How do they look without LaMelo Ball? How does that overall kind of develop for them? I'm of the belief that the Sixers have made a really big push, knowing that if they're built around Embiid, their window is right now or not at all. And if it was not at all, they'd need to start retooling around Maxey and Edgecombe. I think Maxey is underrated off ball. I think Maxey can play an off ball role better than most people within that big seven rotation over in Philly. Edgecombe, we'll have to find out. Jaylen Brown, we know JB can play off ball offensively. They're still going to need, similar to DeRozan, you're still going to want to find ways to get him opportunities in his hot spots, which is in that mid-range, a turnaround jumper, attacking downhill. You're going to want to get him in his hot spots, but he doesn't necessarily need the touches that he had last season or the year before. You can tone that down and still feel good about it. Everyone else, it's a question mark. All I'm saying is I'm okay with the Celtics if they finish top 3 in the East. I think that's a really successful season considering the depth of the conference that they're going to be playing in this year.
And that was a big thing that Stevens hit upon, talking about how the East was really weak this past year and that a lot of teams are going to get a lot better.
Very quickly,
just because of health. I mean, Indy alone is a team that, and again, you're going to have to see what's going to happen with Tyrese Halliburton coming back. I am happy that he's back. He's one of the fun players to watch in the NBA, and the league overall is better with those guys out there playing. And he is one of those guys where when he's going, he's one of the best players in the NBA, without question. That playoff run that we got to see out of him was really, really special. And now it's a question of how he's going to come back. There were so many questions about how Jason Tatum was going to come back. And even in the short time when we saw him ramp up before the postseason, he looked really good. And I'm interested to see how he's going to come off of a full off season of rest and just trying to get back into just game shape. I think that we'll see how the Celtics are going to play and just adapt to this new roster. It's one thing to go ahead and move on from Jaylen Brown. It's another thing to add a guy like Paul George, and then you're adding a Mitchell Robinson, and then you've got a couple young guys that you got in the draft who are going to get into the fold somehow with Mitchell and Sanak. And I think that they're going to add another wing player, but we'll see how things shake out there. But overall, the East is just going to be a lot tougher than what it was based off of all of this movement. Even if guys like, Jaylen Brown are changing uniforms and going to different teams, all these teams have to figure out what this landscape's going to be like and how to mesh together. So there is going to be some growing pains. I think probably some growing pains with the Celtics, definitely some growing pains with the 76ers. And again, going back to the Knicks really quick, I really don't understand what they're thinking financially. And I get it. James Dolan is a notoriously bad owner. There's no way to cut it any other way. The fact that he came out outspokenly was like, we're not going to go into the tax. You just bought a bunch of goodwill with the title. And maybe it was, okay, we got a ring. We broke a drought. Cool, great. I don't feel the need to invest in this roster like that. I
I
think it
think
sends
his
the wrong
exact
message.
words were like, "We'll spend as much as possible up to the second day."
You got to be willing to dip into the second apron. I get it. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I understand like an unwillingness to, but I feel like if Bill Chisholm came out and said that, there would be people in the street with pitchforks and torches, and it just would not go well publicly. And I'm sure there are Knicks fans who are equally as angry. And I think trying to figure out what they're going to do with Cat's extension is big and how they're going to build out the rest of that roster. They lost a couple pieces this offseason. Of course,
Yeah.
Mitchell Robinson defecting to the Celtics. Thank you for a rebounder. Love it. But, just trying to navigate those kind of issues with the CBA. And I will always talk about the CBA just because I think it's important to have the conversation of like, this has changed the way that the landscape is going to be. I think that there's going to be less max contracts going around until things change. Even with Victor Wembanyama taking that extension and taking a pay cut on it, that's the guy who's going to be the face of the league for the next 10 years. Like that guy is not even in his prime yet and was just an absolute monster in the postseason. For that guy to take a pay cut, not a good look for the NBPA. I think the owners won big there, and now it's these types of deals where you're seeing stars change uniforms and get moved around like they are, and big stars like LeBron James taking these pay cuts, going on these small deals. That's going to happen. I think that's going to continue to happen. I am interested to see how the rest of the free agency kind of shakes out too. Like, how do teams react to this? Like, I don't think that Brad Stevens is going to change his approach. I agree on that. I think he went into this offseason with a plan in mind, one of which included trading Jaylen Brown, regardless of whether it was for Giannis or something else. He took the best trade package out there and looked at the numbers and said, we could still put out a really, really good basketball team with Paul George. And we needed to adjust the, interior. You kept Anemi on an extension. You went out and you got Mitchell Robinson, who was the best big available for reasonable money. And, they've built out a roster that's going to compete in a very different Eastern Conference than last year.
I think so. I think that, the second round exit would be the floor for Boston, in my opinion. And that's a solid floor for a second year of a retooling process where you're still trying to avoid the tax. What I also want to point out as well is in recent years, the NBA has been won by teams built around 1 star, maybe 2 stars, with a really good supporting cast. And the outlier there in recent years was Boston, where it was basically a superstar team. And now Philly have that team. And I do think that there's a world where Philly could win it this year. I also think there's a world where Philly just absolutely implodes because there's too many egos and there's only one ball.
Yeah.
And how that plays out throughout this season will dictate how the East shakes out once the postseason begins. The problem is you can't always guarantee that a team that isn't gelling during the regular season isn't going to find a way to put their differences aside to thrive in the playoffs. Their defense is going to be questionable. For me, I'm already coming into this season, and I was doing this before the LeBron to Philly decision. I was coming into this season knowing that anything beyond the second round is a blessing kind of thing. It's like house money. I didn't come in expecting a chip. I didn't come in expecting them to finish first in the East. I'm expecting to see growth as we did last year. I'm expecting to see Jason Tatum emerge and really get used to being that. He's been the number one guy, but not really having somebody like Brown he can defer to. Do you remember when the Celtics traded Marcus Smart? And Brad was like, oh, sometimes I felt like Jason and Jaylen deferred to him late in games, so we removed that option. I feel like moving Brown is a very similar decision, and it was like Marcus Smart was one training wheel, and now we're taking off the other training. Now I feel like we could be looking at, assuming he stays healthy, an insanely good season from Tatum. So I'm just excited to see what Boston does. I'm excited to see them grow. I'm not paying no mind to Philly. I'm sure Philly fans are going to think I'm being salty there. I'm not. I genuinely just want to see how the Celtics develop. Good luck to Philly, but I still think that New York has the best closer in the East right now. And that could play a big role in the finals.
Agreed. Yeah, for sure.
With that being said, everybody use the comment section. Let us know what you think of this LeBron to Philly decision. Are you worried for the Celtics? Do you think this is some bullshit? How you feeling? Let us know. I'll try and respond to as many of you as I can. As usual, you can see it on the screen. Subscribe to the Celtics Chronicle newsletter. Links in the comment section. My name is Adam Taylor. This is my boy Tim Sheils, and we will be back some point next week to continue bringing you as much Celtics content as possible. Until then, deuces.
Cheers.